the conflict between the United States and Iran in the Middle East, in the West Asia. The both parties are in Geneva, not Iranians and Americans. We have Russians as well there. The United States is handling all of a sudden they're negotiating with two sides. But when it comes to Iran, Larry, what we've heard so far, if the new aircraft carrier goes to the new aircraft carrier is crossing the Atlantic Ocean and it's getting closer to the region, and with this new one they're going to have two aircraft carriers, 15 destroyers, and several nuclear submarines, and in the Iranian direction over 600 Tomahawk cruise missiles.
Nah, they don't have that
Yeah,
many.
they don't have that.
Well, let's say okay. There's only one class of submarine that can carry Tomahawk cruise missiles. There are 4 of those. So the maximum the U.S. could deploy right now is 2, because I know 2 of them just come back into port. So there's 2. Each of them carry 100. So there's 200. Each destroyer in each destroyer could carry up to 90. If they carried 90, they would have no defense. So, and how many destroyers did you say?
It's 15.
15.
15, yeah.
I don't think the U.S. has that many.
Yeah.
I mean, hang on for a second. Let's just.
Yeah.
I want to see what the answer. Because I don't know off the top of it. How many destroyers does the U.S. have? See what the answer is. Because it says 70, 80 of the Arleigh Burke class. Now the question though is how many of those are actually operational. So, but let's say they put 15. So actually, if they have 15, each destroyer can carry upwards of 96 missiles. But they split them. Again, the purpose of the destroyers is to provide a screen for the aircraft carrier. So let's say they load half of it with defensive missile, air defense missiles, the other half with Tomahawks. So if you got 15, okay. So you could get easily 700, 800 Tomahawk cruise missiles if we have that many. Okay, that's the other factor. Then these ships, these carrier strike groups, they're going to, if they want to launch them to get inside of Iran, they're going to have to get within 100 miles of the Iranian shore. Right now, most of those, my understanding is the carrier that's there is staying 1,000 miles off because of the Iran's capability with anti-ship missiles. Well, even if they get in within 100 miles, that means those cruise missiles can only go 900 miles inside Iran, which, they're shooting from the Arabian Sea, and to the distance to Tehran, I believe, from down there is like 1,200 miles. So it doesn't have the range. But let's just assume they get out there. This is all predicated on the assumption that these ships will be protected against Iranian missiles. And I think the United States is grossly underestimating Iran's capability to sink ships. So if they really put that many ships online, that would be particularly if they put 15 destroyers. I have not seen that number. That strikes me as extraordinarily high. But if that's what's being deployed, then that's, I think, a sign that the United States is deadly serious about carrying out an unprovoked strike against Iran.
Yeah. Larry, do you feel that all these negotiations in Geneva, they're all some sort of, distraction from what's really happening in the region? Because after all, we know, I don't know what is calculation on the part of the Arab states together with Turkey, and how what is the current situation with the communication between the United States and these states and these countries? Do we know anything about that?
No, well, it's kabuki theater. This is scripted, um, and it's designed to create an impression among the public that the United States tried in good faith to negotiate with those wily Iranians, and Iran refused to negotiate. That's the storyline that's going to be presented. They're going to ignore the fact that Iran has offered to made a genuine offer for inspections that would ensure that Iran doesn't have a nuclear weapon, that Iran is willing to make concessions on enrichment, but it's not going to eliminate its ability to enrich uranium. It has a right to do so as a signatory to the Non-Proliferation Treaty, which Israel is not. But Israel is demanding that Iran get rid of the all ballistic missiles, that they can't travel more than 300. I can't remember if it's 300 kilometers or 300 miles. But Iran's not going to do that because it's its only guarantee to defend itself. Similarly, they want Iran to suspend all support to Hamas and Hezbollah. And again, all of this is predicated on the lie that Hamas and Hezbollah are killing, millions of Israelis. It's like a Holocaust all over. Nothing of the sort. Since 1982, fewer than 5,000 Israelis have been killed in attacks carried out by Palestinians, not just Hamas or Hezbollah. So, this is no matter what Iran comes and offers tomorrow, unless it comes and surrenders and basically says we're going to get rid of the Ayatollah, the United States is going to declare Iran as uncooperative and will then proceed to carry out an attack.
Yeah. Here is what Netanyahu said, Larry.
Is determined to exhaust the possibilities of achieving a deal which he believes can be achieved because of the circumstances that have been created, the force projection, and the fact that, as he says, Iran must surely understand that they missed out last time, and he thinks there's a serious probability that they won't miss out this time. I will not hide from you that I express my skepticism of any deal with Iran because, frankly, Iran is reliable on one thing. They lie and they cheat. I said that if a deal is to be reached, it should have several components that we believe are important not only for the security of Israel, but for the security of the world. The United States, the region, the world. The first is that all enriched material has to leave Iran. The second is that there shall be no enrichment capability, not stopping the enrichment process, but dismantle the equipment and the infrastructure that allows you to enrich in the first place. And the third is to deal also with the questions of ballistic missiles. And the fourth is dismantle the axis of terror that Iran has built. It's been smashed, but it's still there. So there has to be real inspections.
So there is no possibility that they can achieve any of these, points that Netanyahu is asking for. That's why I think your main point is that all Donald Trump and his administration are doing are somehow making some sort of atmosphere that they tried everything. That's why the only solution would be a war.
Correct. Well, and the United States really believes that we can crush Iran. I listened to, I mentioned this one retired U.S. admiral, and He had actually, he had lived in Iran at one point in his life as a youngster, and he was talking about that only 50% of Iran is Persian. Well, that didn't sound right to me, and I looked it up, and as I recall, I think the number was 61 to 62% of the Iranian population is Persian.
Yeah.
Another 17, 18% are Azeri. So right there, the majority ethnic makeup of Iran is Persian and Azeri. Is that your understanding?
Exactly. Yeah,
So
that's right.
these other groups, the Kurds, the Baluchis, I'm not sure what, but they're minority groups.
Yeah.
Yet it appears that most of the information that the West is seizing on to show that there's uprising against the Ayatollah, the mullahs, is coming from these minority groups, and that the U.S. and the Brits are using those minority groups as a wedge to try to get in and attack Iran. Well, I think the nationalism that exists among the Persians and Azeri ethnic groups in Iran is that the events of the last 8 months since June of 2025 has strengthened the nationalist sentiment, not weakened it. You correct me if I'm wrong.
Yeah, you're right. And the other thing about the Kurds is that we have mostly 3 provinces in Iran with the Kurdish population. It's Elam, Kermanshah, and Kurdistan. All of from these 3, 2 of them are not that much in the rhetoric of the Kurdish, society, Kurdish country. They don't buy anything of that sort. The only movement of Kurdish movement is going to be in Kurdistan. They're a fraction of the society, Larry. They're not the majority of the people in Kurdistan. And with the Baluchi, I would argue it's the same. When we talk about the Baluchi, it's not all the people who are living in the Sistan and Baluchistan is the province that they're, then they don't understand, Larry. The other thing is that the younger generations, they don't feel that much of the older generation. During the Shah, these sort of divisions were mostly obvious within the society. Today, with the younger generations, Gen Z, already, you don't see that sort of difference. They don't want any, they don't want to separate from Iran. They don't want to be, they're not seeking for an Azeri and a Kurdish state. This is all delusional. I don't buy just whatever they're talking about. Whatever it's all delusional, in my opinion. And they don't seem to understand. They're not willing to understand what is the reality of the Iran today. And I am so sorry to say that, as you've mentioned, I really feel that something big gonna happen between Iran and the United States, and Iranians are totally prepared for that.
Yeah, well, I think, the United States has been building up its presence at places like Al Udeid and at the air base up in Saudi Arabia. I forget its name. And in Bahrain at the naval facility. If I'm an Iranian military planner, the first hint that the United States is going to start attacking us, I'd take all those places out. I mean, take them out. Saturate them, destroy them, and in the process, launch massive missile waves on the ships. Iran's got effective anti-ship missiles. They need to sink 1 or 2. They sink 1 or 2, all of a sudden, all the juice is going to go out of the United States. This is, back in 2003, in the aftermath of 9/11, and with the lies that were told about Iraq, Ray McGovern just sent this, that 72% of the American public supported invading Iraq. Right now, that number is like 28%, 26%. So, it's quite a difference. I think we need to pay attention to those kinds of numbers.
Yeah. Let me. Larry, do you feel that when Netanyahu was talking about the conflict, what he's seeking for, you see some sort of strange behavior from Netanyahu, looking at the sides and somehow distracted. It shows somehow it could be two signs. One of them, it could be that he knows what they're gonna do and what could bring, the policy of Netanyahu administration finally would bring to Israel, to what's going to happen in Israel, the attack on Israel. How far is there anybody? Do you see anybody in Israel talking about a conflict with Iran and the outcome, a full-out war between the United States and Iran, which would involve Israel, after all?
You mean apart from Bibi Netanyahu?
Yeah.
No, I think the with the Smotriches, the Ben Gavirs, I don't have a specific quote from them, but I can't imagine that they're calling for moderation and negotiation. They're calling for the destruction. So I think politically there is some support in Israel for proceeding with this war.
In the United States, the Trump administration, it's going to be a big war, and everybody knows the escalation and the scale of a war with Iran.
Mm-hmm.
And how is the United States, how is the Trump administration, do they have the permission of the Congress?
No, they don't have the permission of the Congress. And I was looking for Ray just sent out some statistics. There's been it was the SSRS University of Maryland poll early this month said, do you favor the United States being initialing an attack on Iran under the current circumstances? The answer was only 21% favored that, 49% opposed, and 30% answered, I don't know. The Republicans were the most favorable towards the war. So 40% said yes, but 25% of the voters said, no, we oppose it. And again, 35% said, I don't know. So there is not the kind of popular consensus, but, the ones who are most closely tied to the Zionist lobby, the Miriam Adelsons, the Lindsey Grahams, the Senator Richard Blumenthal, the ones who are benefiting from the Jewish money that's been flowing into the political parties. There's that old expression about the money talks. That from a financial standpoint, even though it politically doesn't make sense, if the risks that Donald Trump faces, or let's lay out the scenarios. Scenario one, the most optimistic scenario, is the United States shows up with this military flotilla, this great buildup, and Iran goes, okay, we give up. And yeah, come. You got free inspection. We're not going to enrich any more uranium, destroy our ballistic missiles, and no more support for Hamas and Hezbollah. Not going to happen. Not going to happen. So take that scenario away. Scenario number two is that the United States launches an attack and disables Iran's ability to respond and forces a regime change. At that point, there would be wild celebrations in Washington, D.C. Trump's standing would be boosted significantly. People who had been on the fence, I think, would come around and say, oh, my God, Trump is a genius. Now, Is that a likely scenario? I don't think so. The more likely, there are sort of two other scenarios to entertain. Next scenario is the United States attacks, Iran retaliates, Iran inflicts damage on the United States, but then it becomes a protracted war, sort of a war of attrition. And the question is, who can endure that attrition the most? I would actually make the case that Iran is better positioned simply because the cost, the logistics cost of having to supply all of these ships at sea and the limited production of missiles, of air defense missiles and Tomahawk cruise missiles, means that the United States could rapidly run out of weapons. The fourth sort of scenario would be Iran would strike such a devastating blow, create such shock for the U.S. forces that Trump would be forced to, he might even be forced from office. That would be the ultimate irony. He'd be forced from office. J.D. Vance would take over, and there would be a negotiated settlement. Boy, none of those look good to me.
Yeah.
Because the only other scenario is that Iran and the United States would keep talking past each other, keep threatening each other, but nothing will ever be done. I don't see that.
The problem is that nobody, even those hopeful which part of me is somehow hopeful, but even in that sense, nobody would believe that these people are capable of making an agreement. They're doing endless talks with the Russians. They haven't achieved anything so far, anything practical I'm talking about.
Mm-hmm.
And it's all talk, no action, as Donald Trump himself was repeating about other administration, but he's doing the same. And the other factor on the part of Iranians is that I think Iran, if they attack Iran, Iran is going to respond not only from inside, but from outside. The regional, they have the regional, you call it, I don't know, groups, whatever we can call them. These are prepared to fight the United States and Israel because they know if the United States attacks Iran, it's not going to be just the United States. It's going to be United States with Israel. Well, and of course, some of these regional countries may cooperate with them with the case of the intelligence. This is the worst case scenario. And
right.
How about Europeans? How do you see Europeans are going to be, part of this?
Actually, I think the Europeans will be, the Brits will participate, but and Italy will allow its territory to be used for overflights for U.S. Combat aircraft. But I don't see Germany and others wanting to engage in helping to try to topple Iran.
Yeah. And I think the sudden consequences of a war would be, because Iran is preparing to, today we've learned that the Iranian IRGC is doing some sort of exercise. They have launched a naval exercise at the Strait of Hormuz because they're preparing, if something happens, what they can do with the Strait of Hormuz. Not only the Strait of Hormuz, Bab el-Mandab in the Red Sea would be somehow, considered by the Houthis. Houthis can, put pressure on that direction. And the only, Larry, correct me if I'm mistaken, the only way that Donald Trump could have some sort of upper hand would be a quick war, something that happens quickly, not taking too much time, because if it takes time, as time goes by, the United States is going to lose its leverage if they achieve it in the initial hours.
Yeah, no, absolutely. That's correct. But go back and look at the history of war. When these wars start, whether we're talking World War I, World War II, Vietnam. There's always the assumption that we can get away with it and get out quick. Oh well, hey, look at what happened in Iraq. The invasion started on March 2003, and by May of 2003, mission accomplished. George W. Bush on that aircraft carrier deck. Yeah, man, we kicked ass, took names, we win. And then the actual war started, a civil war, an insurgency. So this, the other element here, though, which has to be taken into account, is that Iran and Russia and China signed a trilateral agreement on, I believe it was January 29th. Now that's significant. I don't know had you heard about that? Had you focused on that while you were in Iran?
I talked with some officials in Iran, and the tone has totally changed in Iran, because those people who were part of, those people in the first, you remember Poon said that they wanted one of the points in the deal was not signed by Iranians, because they said that we are in the process of negotiating with the West. That's why we prefer not to go in that direction. The same people who are arguing that getting closer to Russia would somehow influence our negotiations with the West, they're not feeling that way anymore. They're saying all the way to the east, all the way to Russia and China, because there is no point. I think they're so much close. There's so much. Something is happening, Larry. A lot of weapons are coming in, and we don't know about them. We don't know what is coming in Iran and what is the situation, because it's not just Iran. The United States should be naive to think that Iran is planning alone the fight against the United States and Israel, because I think all these people all together at the commander level, I think they are all connected. Intelligence, commander, military, all connected to somehow go against any aggression on the part of the United States or Israel. This is obvious for me. There is a close cooperation between Iranians and Russians, and of course, in my opinion, it could be Chinese as well.
Yeah, no. Well, look, what struck me, looking at the documents or what's been reported on the trilateral agreement, is China seems to be really in the lead, with Russia close behind, in solidifying a relationship with Iran. You go back and look at 2019. So 2019 was important because that's when Iran and Russia and China started conducting joint naval military exercises. Well, if they started in 2019, that means the planning to start doing that started somewhere in 2018. Well, what was happening in 2018? Well, in 2018, we saw Donald Trump suspend the JCPOA, or walk away from it. So, that I think was sort of the first time that you saw Russia and China do a reversal, turn around and say, okay, we've got to change the nature of our relationship with Iran and moving to build a positive relationship militarily, economically. It wasn't until 2025 that Russia and China finally publicly declared, we're no longer going to abide by these UN sanctions on Iran. That, I believe, gives Iran sort of a light at the end of the tunnel, in terms of they now have an economic road forward through BRICS, through Russia and China, that didn't exist previously. So that many of the problems that they're experiencing with the economy have a reasonable basis now for escaping from those problems. They're starting to correct them. It's surprising that Iran didn't ask for direct financial support from Russia or China on December 28th, 29th, when the central bank was being attacked. However, I would note that 1 month later, January 29th, Iran signed that trilateral security agreement, and one of the key components in that was economic cooperation and support. So Iran and China, look, now they understand that this battle entails more than just a beef between the United States and Iran, or a beef between Israel and Iran. That this is another assault upon BRICS trying to create a new global economic order.